The rumor hit before my coffee did. I was hauling a ladder out of my garage on a quiet Wednesday morning when my neighbor Pete ambled over with that awkward look you give someone when you're about to tell them their house is on fire, but emotionally. "Hey, Xander," he mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck. You might want to talk to your wife." "Olive, right? Something's going around," Karen said. "Well, she said some stuff." My stomach twisted. Nothing good ever starts with Karen said. Especially not Karen Whitmore, the HOA president with the moral compass of a drunk raccoon and the subtlety of a chainsaw. "What kind of stuff?" I asked, already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. Pete shifted uncomfortably. "That Olive was cheating on you, with your contractor, and that your kid, Sienna, got suspended for fighting. Said it's why she's been home all week." My jaw clenched so hard I thought I might crack a molar. First of all, Olive and I have been solid for over 12 years. She works night shifts at the hospital and still manages to show up at Sienna's soccer games with snacks and a smile. And Sienna? She's 10. She's home because she's got strep, not because she's beating up classmates. I didn't even have a contractor. I'd been fixing up our deck myself. I didn't say anything to Pete. I just nodded, thanked him, and walked back into the house. Olive was in the kitchen, still in her scrubs, pouring herself tea. She saw my face and lowered the mug. "What happened?" I told her everything. She didn't even blink. "That woman's got nothing better to do than destroy people," she said, voice calm but tight. "We're not letting this slide." We both knew what this was really about. Last month, I'd challenged Karen during the HOA meeting. She tried to push a rule limiting backyard structures. Said it was about maintaining aesthetic consistency. Translation: she didn't like the treehouse I was building for Sienna. I pointed out that her own backyard had a full tiki bar setup and that the new rule would be selectively enforced. The vote didn't go her way. She hadn't looked me in the eye since. Now she was retaliating small-town style, poisoning the neighborhood well with gossip. I didn't confront her right away. No, I did what any smart man with a fed-up wife and a sick kid would do. I documented. I pulled our security camera footage from the past 2 weeks, including our front porch cams and backyard feeds. Olive dug into our phone records, proving she'd been on shift during the alleged affair. I texted Sienna's school for a formal note confirming her absence due to illness, not misconduct. Then I started hearing more, Mrs. Calhoun, 3 houses down, said Karen told her I was milking HOA funds through fake repair reimbursements. That one made me laugh. I wasn't even on the board. Then came the kicker. Apparently, Karen told 2 other board members that Olive had been investigated for stealing medication at the hospital. That one lit a fire in me. She crossed the line, Olive said, her voice low and even. "I'm filing for defamation." "She's not just bad-mouthing us, she's attacking my job," I nodded. "Let's hit her where it hurts." We met with a lawyer the next day, a real bulldog named Miriam who specialized in defamation and civil suits. She listened, took notes, and smiled when we handed her the evidence. "She's on the HOA board?" Miriam asked. "President," I said. "Then this gets even better. There's precedent for HOA officials being held personally liable for claims made under the color of their position." I didn't pretend to understand all of it, but one thing was clear: Karen wasn't just gossiping. She was using her title as HOA president to spread lies, and that made her legally vulnerable. Miriam filed the paperwork fast. We requested a cease and desist first, just to be civil. Karen responded by doubling down. She actually sent out a printed newsletter. Yes, printed. She's that kind of petty, warning residents to be mindful of families who may be endangering neighborhood standards. She didn't name us, but everyone knew. I confronted her on our sidewalk. She was watering her roses. White gloves, sun hat, the whole Stepford routine. "Karen," I said, voice flat, "you need to stop." She didn't look up. "I don't know what you mean." "You know exactly what I mean. You talk about my wife again, and you'll be doing it in front of a judge." She finally turned, gave me that condescending fake smile. "Oh, Xander, I'm just trying to protect our community." I stared at her for a long second. Then you better start protecting yourself. Because we're coming for everything. 3 days later, we served her with the defamation suit. Karen tried to play victim. She sent out another email to all HOA members, this time accusing us of harassment and abuse of legal systems. But Miriam shut that down fast. Every claim we made was backed by hard evidence. And Karen, she had nothing. Then something unexpected happened. People started siding with us. Turns out we weren't the first ones she targeted. A retired veteran down the block, George, came forward. She once tried to fine him for flying his flag too high. A single mom said Karen spread rumors about her, having different men over when it was just her brother helping with repairs. They were tired, just like us. We collected statements. Dozens of them. People who'd been bullied, fined, and slandered by Karen over the years. It wasn't just about us anymore, it was about the whole neighborhood. Miriam added those statements to the case. It painted a picture of a woman who used her position to control, punish, and defame anyone who didn't bow to her vision of suburbia. The court date was set. Karen, still smug, showed up with a high-priced lawyer and a stack of counterclaims, but none of them held up. We had footage. Dates. Testimonies. Even a recording of her saying, "It's my job to keep the trash out of this neighborhood," in reference to us caught on a neighbor's Ring cam. The judge wasn't amused. He ruled in our favor. Karen was ordered to pay damages for defamation, including emotional distress and reputational harm. The total, just over $80,000. She went pale. I didn't feel bad. Not even a little. She had spent years tearing people down, and now the only thing she'd built her bank account and reputation was crumbling. But that wasn't the end, because during discovery, something else came to light. Something that would make sure Karen Whitmore's HOA reign ended for good. And this time, she wouldn't just lose money, she'd lose her freedom. The day after the court ruling, I drove Sienna to her piano lesson and came back to find a plain white envelope taped to our front door. No stamp, no return address, just a single sheet inside, typed, not signed. It read, "Look into the HOA's maintenance fund. Start with the storm drain project." I stood there on the porch, the paper catching a breeze, wondering which of our neighbors had decided to pass us this breadcrumb. Whoever it was, they didn't want to be seen. And that meant they were scared, probably for good reason. Over the next few hours, Olive and I dug through public records like we were on a deadline. The HOA's financial reports were posted online, skimpy, vague, and mostly useless. But buried in the meeting minutes from a year ago, there was a note about a storm drain revitalization initiative approved with a budget of $25,000. The work was supposedly completed 8 months ago. Here's the problem. I walk my dog past that drain every morning. It still floods when someone sneezes too hard. There was no way anyone had done real work on it. I shot off an open records request to the city's Public Works Department, pretending to be a curious homeowner. They responded the next morning. No permits had been pulled, no inspections filed. No city contractor had touched it. So where did the money go? I didn't want to tip my hand too early, so I waited until the next HOA meeting, which was scheduled for that Thursday night. Karen hadn't resigned yet. She still strutted around with her clipboard and her fake pearls as if the lawsuit had been a minor inconvenience. The board let her stay on while she appealed, which was laughable because there was nothing to appeal. She lost, fair and square. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, which still smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and frustration. Olive stayed home with Sienna, no need for them to sit through Karen's circus act again. I brought a folder, a legal pad, and a digital voice recorder in my pocket. Not because I expected fireworks yet, but because I was done relying on memory. Karen opened the meeting with her usual performative warmth. "Let's keep things positive tonight," she said, eyes landing on me for just a second too long. I waited until the second half of the meeting, right after they talked about repainting the tennis court lines. "I have a question about last year's storm drain project," I said, standing up. Karen blinked. That matter was closed in April. The board approved repairs and the funds were allocated. You said the work was completed, but the city has no record of permits or inspections. They said nothing was ever scheduled. A beat passed. Then Karen gave a tight laugh. Maybe they haven't updated their reports. That happens. I also checked the contractor listed in the expense report, Sundale Infrastructure Services. They dissolved 5 years ago, no longer in business. A ripple moved through the room, whispering, someone dropped a pen. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding, muttered one of the board members, Dale, a guy who always looked like he'd rather be golfing than dealing with neighborhood politics. I turned toward him. Then it should be easy to clear up. I'd like to file a formal request for a third-party audit of the HOA's financials for the last 3 years. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out for a second. Then she said, "That's outside the scope of our agenda tonight. The bylaws allow for it," I said, flipping open my folder and reading directly from the printout. A member in good standing may motion for an audit, and if seconded by at least one other member, the motion must be considered. Pete, from next door, raised his hand. I second it. And just like that, it was on record. Karen tried to stall. She said it would be expensive. Said it would delay other projects, but too many people had started paying attention. The board voted 4-1 in favor. Only Karen opposed. By the time the meeting adjourned, people were buzzing. I didn't stick around. I had what I needed. The audit began 2 weeks later. The firm we hired was local but thorough. I stayed out of their way, but they contacted me privately when they found the first red flag. Over $70,000 in unexplained payments to vendor services that didn't match any business license in the state. They also found that Karen had initiated 3 landscaping projects, none of which had been completed. Yet the checks had cleared. Meanwhile, Miriam had been quietly filing a complaint with the state's Office of Homeowners Association Oversight. They issued a notice of investigation within a month. Then the hammer dropped. The audit revealed a total of $162,000 in misappropriated funds spread across fake vendors, non-existent projects, and inflated reimbursements. Every single check had been signed by 2 people, Karen and Dale. I confronted Dale in his driveway the day the audit report went public. "You knew," I said, voice quiet. He looked down at the oil stain on his concrete. "I didn't know how far it went. I thought it was just bonuses." She said it was board policy. Policy doesn't involve ghost companies. "I didn't cash anything myself," he said quickly. "She gave me gift cards, said it was just appreciation. I didn't take checks." I stepped back. "Then you better get a lawyer." Fast. By the following week, the board voted unanimously to remove Karen and Dale. The HOA's attorney filed charges of embezzlement. The state investigator looped in the county district attorney's office. And then the police showed up, not with sirens, not with cuffs, but with subpoenas, search warrants, and a very polite detective who took Karen's desktop computer, her financial records, and a box of HOA files she hadn't turned over. She was home when they came. According to Pete, she stood on her porch in her robe, trying to argue with the officer about jurisdiction while her dog barked at the wind. The news spread fast. Local outlets picked up the story, HOA president under criminal investigation for embezzlement. Her picture was in the paper the next morning, standing behind her rose bushes with that same stiff expression she wore when telling people to move their trash bins. The charges came down soon after. Wire fraud, misuse of community funds, and falsification of public documentation. 3 felonies, 1 misdemeanor. Miriam called me that night. She's going to take a plea. There's too much evidence. What kind of sentence are we talking about? Probably house arrest and restitution. First-time offender, no priors, but she's going to lose everything. And she won't be allowed to serve on any governing board again. It wasn't exactly the dramatic fall from grace I'd imagined, but it was enough. She'd never hold power over anyone again, not legally. the HOA held an emergency election. This time, the candidates were people who actually wanted transparency. People who brought coffee to meetings instead of threats. I didn't run, but I did help rewrite parts of the bylaws. We added a clause requiring all financial records to be posted monthly, and any project over $5,000 to be verified by 2 independent contractors. Olive went back to her shifts without looking over her shoulder. Sienna's strep cleared up and she started building a new Lego set with me on weekends. The tree house, still there, still perfect, and Karen, she sold her house, quietly. No goodbye parties, no farewell emails. Last I heard, she moved in with her sister across town. No HOA there. Just a rental where someone else mows the lawn. She still owed us the defamation damages. And the court had garnished her bank account to start paying them, but it wasn't about the money anymore. She'd tried to ruin us with lies, tried to make us pariahs in our own neighborhood. And in doing so, she exposed her own rot. In the end, all we had to do was shine a light. 2 weeks after Karen sold her house, I got a letter addressed in blocky handwriting with no return address. It was slipped into our mailbox, not mailed, no stamp, no postmark. Inside were 3 photocopied checks, each made out to a company I'd never heard of, Glenmore Property Solutions. The signatures on all 3 were hers and Dale's. The amounts were staggering: $42,000, $35,000, and $65,000, but what caught my eye wasn't the money. It was the memo line on the last check. Phase 2 Property Acquisition Glenmore Ridge. I stared at it, trying to make sense of the term. Glenmore Ridge wasn't in our neighborhood, it wasn't even in our zip code. I'd heard the name before, though it was a failed luxury development about 15 minutes outside of town. The city had shut it down 3 years ago after the original developer went bankrupt mid-construction. The land had sat untouched ever since, overgrown and fenced off. I showed Olive that night. She read the memo and leaned back in her chair slowly. "There's no way the HOA was investing in land outside our jurisdiction," she said. "That's illegal, completely outside their charter." I nodded. "And if they did anyway, they'd need a reason to hide it. A personal stake." Pete still worked part-time at the county assessor's office. I called him the next morning and asked if he could look up property records tied to Glenmore Ridge. I didn't tell him why. I just said we were looking into something for the audit follow-up. He agreed, a little hesitant but curious. He called back an hour later. 2 of those lots, Lot 17 and Lot 19, were purchased under a shell company 3 months ago, he said. Registered to an LLC out of Florida. Want to guess the name? Glenmore Property Solutions, I said. Bingo. And guess who's listed as the registered agent? I didn't want to say it, but he did. Dale's wife. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat at the kitchen table for a long time staring at the checks again. This wasn't just embezzlement, this was laundering. They were funneling HOA funds into a shell company to buy land for themselves. Probably planning to flip it once development restarted, using our neighborhood's money to bankroll personal investments. No wonder Karen had fought so hard to stay in power. She hadn't just been petty and controlling. She'd been running a criminal racket. I called Miriam. She didn't waste time. Within 24 hours, she had filed a complaint with the state attorney general's office and forwarded the evidence to the county's financial crimes division. They looped in the FBI immediately. Once interstate financial transfers and shell corporations came into play, it became a federal matter. The following week, 2 unmarked black SUVs rolled into the neighborhood. No sirens, no shouting. Just quiet men in suits walking up to Dale's door while a 3rd agent took pictures of his mailbox, his driveway, and the security camera above his garage. Dale opened the door in a fishing vest and froze. He was escorted to the back seat of one of the SUVs without handcuffs, but with the sort of firm guidance that didn't leave room for negotiation. 2 hours later, a federal subpoena landed in my inbox. They wanted everything: emails, audit documents, statements, even my handwritten notes from the HOA meeting where I brought up the storm drain. I sent it all. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was buzzing. Nobody had seen Karen since she moved out, but the gossip about Dale spread like wildfire. Turns out he'd been quietly trying to sell his house for weeks. Now the for sale sign was gone, and a red sticker that read "Property under investigation, do not disturb" was taped across the lockbox. The investigation moved fast. Faster than I expected, honestly. Within a month, the feds had confirmed that Glenmore Property Solutions had received over $200,000 directly from the HOA's reserve funds. The payments had been disguised as landscaping upgrades, emergency drainage repairs, and future development consulting, all fake. And then it got worse. Turns out the land they bought in Glenmore Ridge wasn't just an investment. They had plans, blueprints, full development proposals hidden on a hard drive seized from Dale's home office. They were trying to start their own HOA-style gated community, using stolen funds to buy cheap land and sell it at inflated prices once the market rebounded. Karen had a role too. Emails showed she'd been in direct contact with a real estate agent who specialized in distressed properties. She'd even written a letter of intent to a contractor, offering to fund early clearing and grading with private resources. When the FBI released their first statement, it made the front page of the county paper. Local HOA officials indicted in multi-state real estate scheme. They were charged with wire fraud, conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, money laundering, and misappropriation of community funds. The feds seized their bank accounts, froze the shell company's assets, and flagged the Glenmore Ridge land for forfeiture. I sat on the porch that evening with Olive, passing the paper back and forth like it was too heavy to carry alone. "You think they actually thought they'd get away with it?" she asked. "They got away with it for years," I said. "They probably thought they were too boring to notice." She looked over at me. "And you noticed?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The HOA held a special session to discuss the fallout. This time, the room was packed. People who had never shown up before came in folding chairs and stood in the back. The new interim president, a retired librarian named Cynthia, opened the floor for questions. "How do we keep this from happening again?" someone asked. I raised my hand. "We start by eliminating discretionary project funds," I said. "Every project gets an independent contractor bid and no payments are issued without proof of work from two unrelated inspectors." Cynthia nodded. "Agreed." "We're also proposing a neighborhood oversight subcommittee, volunteers who monitor financial activity and report directly to the board, not through it." The room broke into applause. For the first time since I'd moved in, I felt like the people around me weren't just neighbors, they were allies. That night, Pete came over with a 6-pack and a manila folder. "I never showed you this," he said, handing it to me. Inside were copies of old board emails, things he'd dug up when Karen first started spreading lies. "Why didn't you give me these earlier?" I asked. I wanted to. But I was afraid, figured if I got involved I'd end up with a target on my back too. I flipped through the pages. One email stood out. It was from Karen to Dale, dated 6 months before the storm drain project. "Let's keep pressure on Xander. If he keeps challenging us, we'll have to make an example. His wife's job makes her vulnerable. We just need one rumor to stick." I stared at the words, feeling a cold knot tighten in my chest. "She did this on purpose," I said, more to myself than to Pete. "She planned the whole thing." Olive read the email later that night. She didn't cry, she didn't rage. She sat very still, then folded the page and placed it in the drawer with our legal documents. "Let them try again," she said, but they wouldn't, not anymore. Karen took a plea deal. 5 years probation, full restitution, and a permanent ban from serving on any board or managing any financial assets that weren't personal. She was also ordered to record a formal apology, which the court uploaded to the county's public access site. It was stiff, emotionless, and clearly written by her lawyer, but it was there. A record. Dale wasn't so lucky. The feds pressed harder on him. He'd falsified invoices and forged contractor signatures. He got 18 months in federal prison, followed by supervised release. His house was seized to repay part of the stolen funds. The HOA slowly stabilized. The new board worked transparently, held open budget sessions, and even launched a monthly newsletter written by different residents each time. People started showing up to meetings for the right reasons: gardening tips, neighborhood watch updates, even a chili cook-off sign up. And our family, we were left alone. No more sideways glances. No more whispered rumors. Just neighbors waving from driveways, kids playing on sidewalks, and a community that finally understood the danger of giving power to the wrong people. The house felt warmer, lighter. And every time I walked past the old clubhouse, I remembered what it used to represent and what we'd fought to protect. Not just our names, but the truth. 3 months passed like the slow settling of dust after a demolition. The neighborhood had grown quieter, not in the absence of activity sort of way, but in the sense that people no longer whispered behind hedges or paused conversations when someone walked by. It was a new kind of quiet one, built on transparency and a hard-won sense of mutual respect. I was repainting the trim on our garage one Saturday morning when Cynthia, the new HOA president, stopped at the edge of the driveway. She was holding a thick manila envelope under one arm and wore a look I hadn't seen on her before, something between concern and restrained urgency. "Xander, I need your eyes on something." I set the brush down and wiped my hands on a rag. "What's going on?" She handed me the envelope. Inside were photocopies of internal memos from the HOA's old legal counsel, dated almost 2 years back. The signature line was familiar, Karen's name scribbled next to a stamped seal. "These came from an anonymous drop-off at the community center," Cynthia said. "No note, just this. You see the third document?" I flipped through until I reached it. My fingers paused, eyes scanning the page. It was a letter to a private investigator, authorizing the surveillance of a resident, specifically me. It listed my full name, address, estimated work schedule, and noted potential leverage points: wife's employment, daughter's school attendance, home improvement permit inconsistencies. I looked up. She had us followed, not just followed, Cynthia said. The letter includes payment details. She used HOA funds. "Did you verify that with the financial records?" She nodded. "It's in the expense report, disguised as a security consultation, but it was paid to a PI firm based out of a different county." I contacted them. They confirmed someone from our HOA contracted them under the name K. Whitmore. I didn't speak for a moment. My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "That crosses from civil into criminal. That's why I'm here." She handed me a second folder, this one from the county district attorney's office. "They've reopened the investigation. New charges are coming." Later that week, I sat in the DA's office across from an assistant prosecutor named Leona Patel. She was young, sharp-eyed, and didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We've filed a motion to expand the scope of the existing charges," she said. "The surveillance, plus the fraudulent use of HOA funds to commission it, constitutes criminal stalking under state law. Combined with the financial misconduct, it elevates the case." I leaned forward. "You think it was just me, or were there others?" She tapped her pen against her notepad. "We're working on that, but there's something else. The investigator mentioned a second file he was asked to compile on your wife." Olive was with me. She didn't flinch, didn't shift. She just said, "What kind of file?" "Employment records, hospital access logs." He said Karen wanted to verify her presence during certain dates, that she was looking for discrepancies she could use. My stomach turned. She wanted to get her fired. "She tried," Leona confirmed, "but the hospital never responded to her anonymous complaint. They flagged it as malicious and shelved it." Still, the fact that she tried to create a paper trail of misconduct using a third-party investigator. That's enough to move forward. The new charges were filed within days: criminal stalking, misuse of surveillance, and attempted coercion through fraudulent documentation. All felonies. The judge revoked Karen's probation and remanded her into custody pending trial. The day she was arrested, local news vans returned to the neighborhood. This time, they weren't interviewing board members or speculating about finances. They were reporting on the deeper rot, how a woman entrusted with neighborhood leadership had weaponized that trust to orchestrate a calculated, illegal campaign of intimidation. And then the stories came out. I hadn't known the full extent of it. None of us had. Leona called me back a week later. She had a stack of new affidavits on her desk, statements from 2 other families who had been similarly targeted. One family had tried to install solar panels. Karen allegedly filed a false code violation with the city, then hired the same PI firm to document unauthorized activity on their roof, claiming it posed a safety risk. Another family, a recently divorced father and his teenage son, reported that Karen had attempted to have Child Protective Services investigate him, citing suspicious behavior and unusual visitors. The PI's report, again paid for with HOA funds, had been used to fabricate a complaint. It became clear that Karen hadn't just been stealing money or spreading rumors. She had been building elaborate narratives around people she didn't like, and then using official channels to try and make those narratives stick. The trial started 6 weeks later. It was held at the county courthouse, and the gallery filled every day. Residents from our neighborhood attended in shifts, not out of spectacle but solidarity. I was called to testify on the 3rd day. I spoke plainly, gave what I had: the documents, the timestamps, the recordings, the audit trail. Olive followed me on the stand. Her voice was steady, but you could hear the weight behind every word. She described how the anonymous complaint nearly cost her a promotion, how the PI had parked outside the hospital for 3 nights, how she'd had to change her shift patterns just to feel safe. Karen didn't look at us once. Her attorney tried to claim she'd acted out of excessive concern for community standards, that she had let her role cloud her judgment. But the jury didn't buy it, not after hearing from the other residents, not after seeing the paper trail. Not after Leona closed by showing the jury a calendar Karen had maintained, a physical one seized from her home, with certain homes marked in red ink and notes like "pressure this month" and "wife's job equals weak point." The verdict came back after 2 days, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in state prison, no parole for the first 3. She was also ordered to pay restitution to every family she had targeted, including a separate civil penalty to the HOA for damages to its reputation and funds, but the part that mattered most. The judge issued a lifetime ban on her holding any fiduciary or leadership position in any community organization, anywhere in the state. Karen was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. No pearl necklace this time, no clipboard. Just a woman who had built an empire of control, now reduced to a cautionary tale. The neighborhood moved forward. The HOA board voted to install a permanent independent auditor. All major decisions were now subject to community vote. A new subcommittee was formed to oversee code enforcement, ensuring no one person ever held too much power again. Cynthia stayed on as president, though she insisted it was temporary. She wanted to help steer the community through the transition, then find someone younger to take the reins. Someone with no interest in control, only fairness. I declined when they offered me the position. "I'm better with a paintbrush than a gavel," I told them. Instead, I helped set up the neighborhood's first community day, a Saturday morning where everyone pitched in to clean up the walking trails, repaint the playground, and share a potluck lunch. Olive brought her signature lemon bars. Sienna ran the lemonade stand, raising $37 for the animal shelter. When Cynthia handed her a thank you card from the board, Sienna grinned and said she wanted to donate the money in memory of the mean lady who used to hate tree houses. Even the older residents laughed. That night, as we sat on the back porch, the deck lights glowing softly, Olive leaned into my shoulder and watched Sienna chase fireflies across the lawn. It's strange, she said. How something so ugly can end up bringing people closer. I nodded. Sometimes you have to burn the rot out before anything healthy can grow. We didn't talk about Karen after that. There was no need. She'd written her story. We had simply made sure it reached the right ending.